Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Mel Ochoa. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Landmark Ventures. First of all, I want to make sure and hope everyone is staying safe and healthy out there. And we really thank you for joining us today for our session around the future of work and looking at the unemployment rate and the workforce, particularly right now during COVID, but what things will look like over the next 6 months to a year as we get back to the quote unquote normal way of doing things. As I mentioned, I'm the COO at Landmark Ventures, and we organize the Social Innovation Summit that is coming up on June 2nd and 4th, so less than a month away. And you can register today at socinnovation.com. We've developed this webinar today to mirror a session at the Social Innovation Summit. So the fast-paced mix of speakers and formats today is what you will see at our 3-day summit on June 2nd through 4th. Also want to thank our SAS partners, our Social Innovation Summit partners who are with us throughout the year. I really appreciate their thought partnership around all of the topics and themes that come to the summit. And then also want to remind all of our attendees that you have a digital brochure that we sent you, and in that digital brochure in your email, there's an agenda and all the speaker bios, okay? Also want to take a second to thank the essential heroes across the spectrum, from healthcare to education, to first responders, to parents handling school and work at the same time. Just want to make sure that we thank you in everything we do and every time we talk about COVID. So really appreciate everything that is happening out there. We offer this webinar because it seems like the right time to start thinking about what's next in rebuilding our workforce after the pandemic. This is tough because we aren't really out of the woods yet around COVID, but we need to start thinking about getting millions of people back to work. We've heard that this is Depression era level jobless numbers with approximately 30 million unemployment claims in the US alone. And within that, we're seeing disheartening numbers in terms of Latino and Black statistics. I think it hovers around 17 and 19% unemployment right now. I think our national average is up to about 14%, if I remember correctly. And what's most concerning as well is that I've heard that some jobs just are not coming back. And so what do we do with that framing in mind? So we need to look ahead and think about how to get people back to work. That's really the core essence of the session today and the core question that we want to address across our speakers. What better way to do that than bringing in an amazing set of speakers approaching this from different angles. So we have Seema Kumar from Johnson & Johnson, Jamira Burley from Global Business Coalition for Education, Dr. Angela Jackson from New Profit, Abby Frost from Gap, Ryan Craig from University Ventures, Bertina Ceccarelli from NPower, and Tricia Williams from Mastercard Foundation. So thank you both everybody attending, and thank you to our speakers. We'd like to start things off with Seema. She's the Vice President, Innovation, Global Health, and Policy Communication at Johnson & Johnson. It's really nice to have her joining us. I know I don't want to be tone deaf in saying J&J is on the front lines and thinking about this heavily right now. And so although I want to talk about workforce, I do want to check in on a few other areas as well that you're thinking about as a company. I guess the first question that probably everyone is thinking about is how have you supported essential heroes over the past 2 months? And I think we still have you on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Excellent. Yes. Thank you, Mel. And thanks for organizing this really important webinar and a very important topic. So Johnson & Johnson has had a longstanding commitment, as you may know, to supporting and championing the frontline healthcare workers, dating back almost to the epidemic mask that J&J created with the sterile gauze during the Spanish flu or the pandemic flu in 1918. So since then, or even before then, we've had a huge amount of commitment to frontline healthcare workers and protecting them. More recently, just at the World Economic Forum in January, we announced a $250 million commitment over 10 years to inspiring, recruiting, training, retaining, mobilizing frontline healthcare workers, and another 50 million just recently for the frontline support in battling COVID. But ultimately, I think we can only put an end to this pandemic with a vaccine. And that vaccine is going to be critical to return to work, to return to some level of normalcy, but also to protect the frontline healthcare workers in helping them actually be able to do their jobs, without having the fear of contracting the coronavirus. And so J&J has been working on the vaccine since the sequence of the coronavirus was first published in January. And we're working 24/7 using the same technology that we used to create vaccines for Zika, RSV, HIV, and Ebola. And we've identified a lead candidate. We're working 24/7 to get it to clinical trials at the latest by September, and partnering with multiple organizations to get to that as quickly as possible. Because at the end of the day, today, as you know, this week is International Nurses Week. And today on our special show, LinkedIn Live show on Road to a Vaccine, we interviewed some nurses who are on the front lines taking care of severely ill COVID patients. And having a vaccine would just be extraordinarily important in this sphere. Yeah.
Well, we're all super supportive right now, and we wish you the best as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible.
Thank you.
As I mentioned before, looking at the minority community and aligning it back to workforce, I know minority communities have been hardest hit. How do you think, from your perspective, we can invest in these communities to mitigate such impact and devastation in the future?
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, minority communities have been hardest hit. And at first, it wasn't really even clear. The first data came out from University of Connecticut by Dr. Cato Lorenzen, who began to look at sort of the disparities. And it is clear that there is several reasons. Well, the disparity is clear. There's a few reasons. Number one, I think that there is these disparities mostly are in those urban hotspots where the population density is very high and access to testing is not as much and social distancing is harder. So I think that perhaps starting by focusing in on those hotspots is one thing. The second thing is that I think that there is also a study ongoing, and we're hoping to actually look at it as well as to why there's a disease disparity. And what do I mean by disease disparity? These same communities are disproportionately affected by diabetes, prostate cancer, lupus, other types of hypertension, obesity, etc. And that also, as you know, pre-existing conditions can negatively impact the outcomes from COVID. So whether it's testing, whether it's social distancing, all of this. J&J, several things. I want to say that we want to promote greater diversity in clinical trials, ensure the equitable access to tests and vaccines across the populations, but also we're supporting nurses within the African American community, and also supporting women. Women, it may not be a surprise, are hardest hit by COVID. And we continue to invest in women-owned businesses through our supplier diversity program. And finally, I'll say one thing, this is also mental health month. And there is, just even before COVID, mental health was a huge issue across the populations. But I think now, especially with frontline healthcare workers who are having to make difficult choices in delivering care, mental health issues are big, especially, and social distancing, we're all alone, and working from home is stressful. So we're looking at mental health and resiliency as well. Yeah,
that makes sense. Is also moving into the workforce element a little bit, you're thinking about STEM, you're thinking about the future in science and medicine and healthcare. It's on everyone's mind, a little worried in terms of having that pipeline. What are you thinking about, and what are you focusing on around STEM, making STEM more accessible, et cetera, for young people in our future workforce?
Yeah, I think about it like it's almost like the best of times, worst of times, because on the one hand, it is the worst of times because, it's very hard to focus on anything other than what's immediately, in front of us, which is keeping ourselves safe and healthy. That having said, I personally speaking, at a personal level, but also on behalf of Johnson & Johnson, I have just been extraordinarily pleased by the focus again on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And never before has the importance of STEM been so apparent as what we face today. I mean, to see Brad Pitt playing Tony Fauci on SNL, I mean, scientists are the heroes now. And so the moment is now for us when the attention is high towards science and we have an attentive audience to get those people into STEM careers. So what we're doing is we're continuing to work with several organizations to really continue to keep that drumbeat about youth being educated and entering into STEM careers. We're participating in the Science and Engineering Festival, in the BioGenius program, and then also beyond America, across the world, looking at women in STEM in the youth, university, and professional level. And then finally, I think what we need to do is to use this moment where there are so many role models in science to really showcase the power of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And finally, again, I mentioned the Road to a Vaccine show, which is a show on LinkedIn Live, Johnson & Johnson's LinkedIn Live channel, which we've been using to bring people along on the journey and do some science education and showcase young women and men who are on the front lines of care.
It's so interesting. And I guess sort of the final leg in the tripod here is the entrepreneurial community and small businesses, and that area being hit hard as well. And especially reopening them and getting them back up to speed so that we can provide jobs again. What is Johnson & Johnson doing to help support them?
Yes, entrepreneurship is a critical pillar of Johnson & Johnson. And as you may know, we have what's called so-called J-Labs facilities all over the world. There's 14 of them. And what they are incubators where young entrepreneurs who have ideas and small companies come and are residents in our J-Labs facilities. Obviously, with the COVID crisis, this has impacted them. And so what we've done is to help them pivot. So 45 of our resident companies across the globe are now turning their work into focusing on COVID and the COVID pandemic. And then during this critical time, we're providing financial relief program for the resident companies who are suffering from economic hardship, but also, investing in some of the companies that are doing some really extraordinary work, because we are going to come out of this, that we're sure of, because we're working on a vaccine. And when we come back to normalcy, we need these young entrepreneurs to be thriving and working on other diseases, because there are other diseases to be working on as well. Yeah. And finally, as a company, we have a broad base of expertise and seasoned people who can advise entrepreneurs on how they should pivot, what they should be doing. And so we've been providing experts and expertise and support to them. So that's some of the work that we've been doing.
A lot of momentum on your side of things. Thank you, Seema, so much. We know you're busy, and really appreciate the time you spent with us, and we're really pulling for you and fully supportive of everything you're doing right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Now we want to pull in Jamira. One aspect of this conversation is what are the skills that are needed, both immediately in terms of getting everyone back to work, but also down the road, looking at those essential skills. And Jamira has been a great friend of the Social Innovation Summit, has spoken in the past at the summit, and through the Global Business Coalition for Education, she's been doing some work around some of the skills that they're thinking about and that are essential. So we'd like to turn it over to Jamira to take us through some of her thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Mel, and thanks to the Social Innovation Summit for having me. I'm always excited about conversations regarding education, particularly as we look at the fourth industrial revolution and all the opportunities that it will provide us for including more people who are at the margins to get access to workforce development. As mentioned, my name is Jamira. I am the head of youth engagement and skills at the Global Business Coalition for Education. And a lot of the work that I do is centered around how can we identify what those skills are for the fourth industrial revolution, but also how can we work with businesses and individuals around the world to help ensure that they have access to the knowledge and the skills to meet the demands of the future. So the Global Business Coalition is a movement of businesses committed to ending the global education crisis. As you might know, our mission is to really ensure that every child, regardless of village, zip code, or community that they live in, they have access to the skills needed to fully participate in society. And we do this work by leveraging our relationships both with corporate leaders, with nonprofit entities, and with multilateral organizations around the world to ensure that people are looking at the issue from a holistic perspective, and more importantly, are including the voices of those most impacted, young people. And so two of the topics that I am going to talk about a little bit later are going to showcase exactly how we do this work and how we center our work around those who are living at the margins. And so to really think about how the Global Business Coalition operates, we connect business leaders, individuals, and companies to the opportunities that are on the ground in the communities around the world. Whether you're talking about leadership development programs, whether you're talking about new innovative ways in which to teach young people skills, or you're actually talking about advocacy efforts that ensures that governments are actually investing more in education. We create opportunities for cooperation between business leaders, businesses, and multilateral organizations and governments. We showcase that work on a global stage because we believe that by doing so, it actually encourages and promotes other businesses and individuals to give more and to be more conscious of how they actually participate in charity or how they participate in social impact efforts. And discovery is the last. We do a lot of independent research that really looks at the intersectionality between social impact, education, and communities. It helps to provide us new lens on how we look at the work, and also helps to legitimize the efforts that we have both on the ground and on the global level. So the challenge that we all face, right? So before COVID-19, we were faced with more than 260 million young people around the world who are out of school. The vast majority of them being girls, the vast majority of those being poor. And since the COVID-19 outbreak, we now have 1.5 billion young people who are out of school. And this is all happening during a time where automation, innovation, robotics, and technology is transforming the landscape of global education as we know it and the workforce as we know it. And so prior to COVID-19, we knew that more than 40% of businesses lacked clear opportunities and pipelines in order to engage young people who had the necessary skills to actually enter the workforce. And so we know that through the data that we've identified is that by 2030, more than half of our generation of young people will not be on track to enter the workforce. That's 825 million young people. And even those who will have the skills, they still might lack access. And so we realize that there is a daunting task ahead of us, not only to address this global problem, but also to look at the opportunities that it may provide us to include more young people at the table. And so two programs that I would like to talk about, one of them being our Business Investment for Education Impact Initiative, which is in partnership with BHP Foundation. The GBC Education and BHP Foundation have joined together to develop a multi-year partnership to enhance the quality of impact investments in education across the board. So as many of you may already know, there's close to $4 billion of private sector money that goes into funding and investing in education around the world. Oftentimes that is one-off grants. It is invested in programs that actually are not being impactful. It's not being complemented by governmental funding. And so the Business Investment in Impact Initiative is going to reevaluate how that money has been spent, but also reevaluate where are the opportunities to intensify that impact. And we're doing that through developing a guidance group that is going to have business leaders, young people, educational experts, social impact innovators to really reevaluate where are the opportunities for businesses and education to merge together, not from a private sector aspect, but really from a how can we take the knowledge and the innovation and the tools in the business sector to better enhance the opportunities for young people in the classroom. And the second program that we have launched nearly a year ago is in partnership with Deloitte Global, Skills for the Future. So about a year ago, we developed a report with Deloitte Global that reevaluated what were the skills needed for the fourth industrial revolution and where were the opportunities for the business community to help come in and help to supplement and or provide additional resources and opportunities for those communities. And so what we found during this report, which is Prepare Tomorrow's Workforce for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is that there were 4 key skill areas that were identified: workforce readiness, soft skills, technical skills, entrepreneurship. Right, we know that in the time of automation, in the time of innovation, there are going to be so many jobs and industries that are going to be drastically impacted. And so how can we really create leaders for tomorrow and provide them transferable skills that can be seen in any different industry? One piece of information that came about during that report is that 15-year-olds today will work in 5 different industries, 17 jobs throughout their lifetime. And so this is not only incumbent for one specific industry to care about, but all industries to really recognize that we all play a role in ensuring young people have the necessary skills to do that work and to create the lifestyle that they want. The next thing I will say is that in addition to those 4 skills, we also identified 4 primary challenges for business leaders and stakeholders who want to address this crisis. One is, how do we reimagine, right? This is a unique opportunity where it can just be seen as a problem, but it should also be seen as, how do we use these levers, these enablers to include more voices, include more populations in the job market. And then also, how do we reposition, right? How do we reposition how governments and entities are all working together? How do we realign and scale up or deepen our investment in those communities? And how do we reframe the possibilities for those communities, particularly the most marginalized of populations? I'll actually go to the next slide because I know I'm running on time. Again, our goal is to make impact through collective impact. And that goes directly in line with our new initiative that we're starting called the Skills Friendly City Initiative. The Skills Friendly City Initiative really focuses on how do we take what we know to be true at the global level, at the national level, to better invest in education in cities, and also ensure that cities are working together, whether it's mayors working in collaboration with business leaders, working in collaboration with community organizations and young people to formulate how do cities develop institutions and pipelines that enables for those communities to get the skills, to get access to those jobs, and to build the futures that they want for themselves and their communities. And so we are looking at launching this program a little bit later this year with the goal to re-examine how those cities create those efforts. And so the objective for that initiative is to define and communicate those standards of living. So how do public transportation, the environment, city structure, governmental entities play a role in job development? And how do we incentivize that excellence, right? So how do we identify the cities that are doing extremely well while also creating technical assistance opportunities for the cities who have the desire but may not have the resources? And then creating a community of cross collaboration between city leaders and community members. So that's really where we are. There's a lot of great opportunity, again, that I think we should take advantage of, but we should also recognize that every single moment we wait, there's another young person who don't have access to broadband internet, who doesn't have the necessary skills or resources to get access to education. And so it's really our goal to work in collaboration to do that. So for more information, you can contact me or my colleague, Emily.
Well, thank you so much, Jamira. Good work. Definitely much needed thinking right now as we look at those skills. So hopefully people out there, attendees, will partner with you to get this farther down the field. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Moving right along, we want to open it up to our panel of experts, and I'm really excited about everyone joining us today. I love all these organizations for different reasons. With New Profit, great foundation up in Boston, but doing national and global work. Dr. Angela Jackson, a partner there. She has done a lot of work around future of work and their Learn to Earn program. Abby Frost, the director of This Way. And then Ryan Craig, who's the co-founder and managing partner at University Ventures. I have read Ryan's books, and I read his weekly or perhaps monthly, I forget, blog and all of his thoughts. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't agree, but they're all, they always push my thinking nonetheless. And so I'm really excited to have him here as well. So let's open things up. We'd love to ask each of you in terms of the disparities that COVID has shown us that have already existed, but then also added to the conversation. How have you each seen disparities in our workforce ecosystem either unearthed or exacerbated as 30 million people filed for unemployment? So the things that you're seeing out there, particularly around disparities. Angela, would you mind kicking us off?
Absolutely, Mel. Thank you to the team at Landmark for putting this on. Really excited to have this important conversation. At New Profit, we had been thinking about the disparities pre-COVID for a year and a half, had been working on the future of work and really looking at how the workforce system really did not work properly for low-income Americans. And what has happened with COVID is it has exacerbated some of the fractures that we've seen in the system. So for example, 86% of the layoffs that we've seen, those are people making $40,000 or less a year. So we know that people who could least afford to be impacted are literally the most impacted, right? And then if you couple that with the fact that many of these workers are also considered essential, which means that they are also disproportionately exposed to getting the COVID virus. So we are really thinking deeply about what does an equitable recovery mean? Pre-COVID, we had been thinking about how we take more low-wage workers who may be low-skilled and get them the skills so they can be on pathways to jobs with livable wages. And we think that that conversation is going to be really critical when we think about a post-COVID world, how we have an equitable recovery and bring these people into the fold and make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. Abby?
Yeah, I would call out three things. First, childcare is critical to a functioning economy. We're putting workers in a position of making the choice of leaving their kids at home or going back to work. And that's a pretty unfair dilemma. The second that it's really unearthed is that state unemployment systems were designed in the 1930s and haven't been really revamped since then. And that needs to be something that gets addressed in the future. A bright spot, something that's surprising, what we're seeing among retailers is that competitors in non-pandemic times are becoming collaborators. We're trying to proactively share knowledge and learn from what each other is doing so we can get people back to work. We have this shared purpose.
That makes sense. Ryan, would love you to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think it's just exacerbated the divide that we've seen between workers who can work remotely and who are in good jobs, typically full-time employment with multiple career paths, and those who literally need to show up in person in order to get paid. And those are the people for whom we need to think about, essentially rethink our system of education and workforce development, because they need new pathways to good and better jobs now and into the future.
Yeah, agreeing. Angela, so at New Profit, you mentioned your portfolio, the future of work, the initiative that you've been building over the last handful of years. I guess when you look at your portfolio right now and supporting the organizations that are going through New Profit, what has changed over the last few months, especially as it relates to getting people back to work quickly?
Well, first of all, and I want to go back to something that Abby mentioned about employers working together in different ways. Really what we want to incentivize are people in general, the actors in the workforce system working together in different ways. So let me put a bit of color on that. We are launching in June a grant challenge that's going to incentivize innovators in workforce, in research and technology to think about how do we put people back to work. And we know that we're going to have unprecedented collaboration if we really want to make a difference with this audience. So we're hoping as a philanthropy, what we can do is use our capital to incentivize that collaboration. And what we're hearing from the field, especially we're considering working with workforce boards, that when people are going to start looking for jobs, when social distancing is lifted, when the guidelines are lifted, we're going to see unprecedented people going to those doors. And we need to make sure that we're acting collaboratively to meet that need, because one entity alone will not meet the need that will be there.
Yeah, that collaboration is important, especially for workforce boards. It's a smart move. It's really smart. I think a lot more people should tap into the workforce boards out there.
Yeah, I think I would just like to add with the workforce boards, a lot of people don't know this. Pre-COVID, 1 in 12 U.S. Americans use their workforce board. And when I tell people that, some people say, well, what's a workforce board?
Right.
That's because most professional people don't have to use them, right? So we're really talking about our sweet spot and target audience. So if it was 1 in 12 pre-COVID, imagine what it's going to be post-COVID, again, when social distancing goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. Abby, over to you. I think stores are opening up by the end of May. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that means at least some of the jobless will be getting back to work, hopefully in the stores. I guess, what is your, or GAP's plan, I guess, to ramp back up quickly to employ its workforce, but especially with your role, how has store closures impacted providing first job experience through your program and the participants?
Yeah. So yes, we are opening up 800 stores by the end of May. So that's about 25% of our entire fleet. And we're really trying to take this time to strike the balance of bringing people back as quickly as possible and taking the opportunity to bring people back differently. I'm excited to share, for the last several weeks, 1,100 of our stores have been opened, but not to the customer. We've been using them as mini distribution centers, trying to get product out to customers, take pressure off our actual distribution centers, and fulfill online orders. We've also been operating what I call takeout for t-shirts, or curbside pickup of product. So we have been getting people back to work in a slow, thoughtful way. And these operations have really allowed us to get some runway to test how to bring people back differently. So for example, we've divided people up into teams who work the same shifts. And this provides a lot of predictability for our employees. So that's a huge win. And then being a business win as well, it's increasing our productivity. So just as champion sports teams get better as they work together more, our teams are getting more productive as they work together more frequently. And so we're seeing those benefits. As it relates to This Way Ahead, which is a program that provides first jobs to young people in our stores, I'm thrilled to say we're still going to be providing those opportunities. And in fact, our talent team, I was one of the first people they called when they started to think about how we're hiring externally to fill roles of people who might decide not to come back to our company. So we are working on that now. And there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that's really a testament to the strength of This Way Ahead's talent pipeline. This Way Ahead hires are great employees. The retention is strong. They stay twice as long as their peers. They're highly diverse and they have higher engagement scores.
Yeah, that's great. There is going, I really want to avoid using the word new normal, or the new phrase new normal, but it sounds like there's a new normal in terms of how people shop and how people work in retail. So thank you. Ryan, I want to get this right. Your book, A New You, Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College. Faster and cheaper are the key words right now in a lot of ways. What do you think is the renewed importance of faster and cheaper pathways to jobs right now?
Yeah, look, we hope that most of these jobs will return, but in all likelihood, millions won't. And it cannot be the case to our message to the newly permanently unemployed is that your only option is to pay a lot of money or incur a lot of student loan debt to enroll in a degree program at an accredited college or university if you want to have any hope of finding a pathway to a good job. Even before COVID, the skills gap was one of the biggest challenges facing America. The fact that we had tens of millions of workers out of position relative to the skills that employers were seeking meant that we had a 45% underemployment rate for new and recent college graduates, that we had over 7 million unfilled jobs, and that there was a broadly shared sense that pathways to good jobs were narrow or non-existent, and that the American dream was at risk as never before. So even before COVID, we needed to rethink pathways to work. In my book, I introduced the concept of last mile training, meaning training on the specific digital skills, business skills, and soft skills that employers are seeking, but not finding. And this last mile training is being done across a range of new models, boot camps that charge tuition, boot camps that utilize income share agreements, and new last mile training models that leverage staffing and apprenticeship. We're most focused on those last mile training models that reduce or eliminate frictions for both candidates and for employers. For candidates, the key frictions to think about are the cost of upskilling and the uncertainty of an employment outcome. We need models that do something about those, which traditional college and university programs do not. For employers, hiring friction or the reduced propensity of employers to hire candidates where they literally haven't done the job before, which is a natural byproduct of the increased cost of a bad hire, as well as high churn at the entry level, also needs to be addressed to build new scalable pathways. So we're enthusiastic about new models like Talent Path, Tectonic, Avenica. These models eliminate the cost for candidates and guarantee them jobs while acting as the employer of record for a year or more, and therefore allowing employers to try talent before they have to buy the talent. They're the ones that are scaling fastest because they're absorbing or eliminating these frictions. So this is the work that we're focused on, establishing these new intermediaries across a wide range of skill gap sectors that'll provide pathways for thousands of candidates each year and then throughput them into full-time positions at employers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, Brian Craig has a lot of smart ideas, smart ways of looking at things. So make sure you read his book and his posts. We have about a minute left. Want to do a quick round robin here because I want to get this question in. So maybe your 10-second, few-word answer. What would you each advise employers to do as the most critical next step when it comes to the workforce/jobless as the economy reopens? What is the one thing they need to be thinking about more than anything else in 10 seconds? Angela, do you want to start us again?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just kind of taking from what Brian said is thinking about how employees can learn and earn on the job. We know that a lot of people cannot afford to go back to college, so how can they have opportunities to upskill while they're on the job? And looking at models like Merit America, looking at Guild to make it more of a benefit to learn while you're on the job.
Yep, absolutely. Abby?
The chance to reinvent labor models and a big mindset shift is required. We need to put people at the center. We need to accept their potential if they don't have the credentials to hire them. And also life experiences matter a lot. I think after the Great Recession, we ended up creating a lot, not we Gap Inc., but we the nation, a lot more jobs in low wage positions. And
Yep.
so we really need to be thinking about not just more jobs, better jobs.
Agree. Ryan, close us up, please.
Sure. Look, having spent over 20 years in education, I'm not against education, training, or upskilling. That's like being against motherhood and apple pie. But I think it's high time we moved from a paradigm of funding, public funding, philanthropic funding, of funding only education and upskilling to actually funding job placement with clear standards on what constitutes a good job worth paying for.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you all experts. Love your work in everything you're doing at your organization. So hopefully attendees, reach out to them. There's our LinkedIn in the speaker guides. And so please reach out to everyone to see how you can partner with New Profit, Gap, and University Ventures. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Mel.
Bye. Now we want to bring in Bertina. She's the Chief Executive Officer at NPower. And I will say that I have known Bertina for a few years now, and she's one of my favorite people. She puts a smile on my face every time I see her, and she is the sweetest person, just supporting me and everything that I do ongoing. I was able to visit an NPower, I don't want to call it an office, a training center, a classroom. You can tell me, in Brooklyn a few years ago, and it was one of the best experiences I've seen in terms of skill development. And so really happy that you're here with us today, Bertina. You're closest to job seekers, and you're closest to job seekers who are actually learning some new tech skills, etc. What are you hearing from them as they see this unemployment rate and see the uncertainty on the horizon?
Yeah, Mel, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's the right time for this conversation. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of fear and anxiety. But I would also add that the populations that we serve in our tech training program at NPower, largely young adults and veterans from underserved communities, face challenging odds long before COVID. And I would say that they are largely from communities where unemployment rates have been 3 to 8 times higher than local averages, communities that have been disproportionately impacted both medically and economically. But I would also say communities that reflect disproportionately resilience and motivation, qualities that any employer would embrace. And I think that right now today, programs like ours, and I would include for Scholas and for younger audiences, Urban Alliance and Genesis Works, are exactly the kind of upskilling and retraining initiatives and work-based learning programs that are really important to fill in a gap today.
Yeah, absolutely. On the corporate front, you work with a lot of partners. What are you hearing from them in terms of the skills needed in the coming months and expectations for rehiring, bringing the workforce back into their walls?
Yeah, well, and I think Ryan said it really well on the panel. It is all about jobs. Training is important, but at the end of the day, that we need to be able to connect people to the jobs that are in demand. So we work with a lot of corporate partners. We recently did a survey where 75 leaders from large companies like large banks, retail, pharma, consulting companies responded. And here's what they told us about the expectation for the next 6 to 18 months. First, hiring, of course, is going to slow dramatically through the end of the year, but we see in IT positions an uptick during first quarter. We also see a renewed importance of the IT generalist category, but also a heightened importance of cyber and cloud-related support positions. We also see that there's likely going to be reduced dependency on some of the offshoring of IT skills as companies reevaluate their business continuity principles and look to diversify to more onshoring opportunities for IT skill sets. So we think that also opens up a lot of work-based learning opportunities for the graduates of programs like NPower. We also see that there's going to be continued working from home for months and probably years ahead of us. So the chief information officers, chief technology officers at these large companies are all preparing for that new reality.
Yeah, and all of this affects your programming, right? You have a very hands-on way of training. As I said, I saw your location, a lot of computer terminals, a lot of interaction. How has all of this impacted your programming?
Yeah, so I think it's for any of us who are in this space, it's really critical to stay close to what some of those evolving needs are going to be, because it's changing, right? It's not just the future of work. Right now, it's the future of everything. This has been a tech-enabled period of time. It will be that way for some time to come. We have had to change not only what we teach, but how we teach. And so, like so many training programs in schools, we're doing a lot of work via a virtual platform. We use Zoom. But instead of a regular 4-hour session, which we had back when you visited us in Brooklyn, we've managed through our Instructors Institute to think very differently about how we chunk out learning. So we'll do 10 to 15-minute segments of learning. With testing, we've introduced live video segments. We do more one-on-one online tutoring. We've also learned to introduce some really fun games like IT Jeopardy, just to keep the engagement high. In terms of the what, we've added modules on remote troubleshooting, computer network segmentation, web-based email support, more cloud services. We know that these are going to be skills that will be in greater demand in the coming months. And then finally, I would just say what's really critical is not just the technical skills that lead to the certifications, but also the professional development and the social services that are now more important than ever for our students and quite frankly, for our staff as well. Yeah. So we've introduced ways for our corporate volunteers to get more engaged through virtual lectures and virtual mentoring.
It sounds like you've had to overhaul a few different things. So you've had a lot on your shoulders recently. Congratulations, but I know there's still more pivoting to be done. I will say, I do place you on a pedestal. You are an expert in all of this, especially on the tech side of things and skill development and upskilling. I guess as you look to advice that you could give to companies or CHROs or CEOs, what would it be as they're thinking about skills or the jobless right now, or just people you're working with in your training center?
Yeah, I would say three things to any employer. Don't let up on diversity and inclusion. That needs to be maintained as a top priority. Be generous in health benefits for employees of all levels. And finally, I would say develop partnerships with providers of non-traditional talent pipelines that represent a different credentialed talent than maybe you hired in the past.
Yeah. And as you mentioned before, you've worked with a lot of veterans, so thank you for doing that. And also other underserved communities. Knowing what we know now in the climate, how have you been thinking about your reach and impact as you look to the next 5 years? I'm sure it's pushed you off your track a little bit. So when you think of reach and impact with NPower, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Mel, it's a really great question. There's no doubt we have gotten a lot of questions from the community, from city governments where we serve, from funders, asking us to dramatically expand because we are doing everything online. And I think it's reasonable to suggest, why can't an organization like NPower serve everybody? And we've taken stock of that to do it well and to maintain quality and fidelity in what we're doing, and also to connect people to jobs. We've made the decision to stick with the two populations we know best, because these are the populations that have historically been marginalized to begin with. And our fear is that by stepping away from those populations today, they will become further marginalized. And that does them or the economy no good. But I would say that our plan is to dramatically increase our capacity to serve those populations beyond the geographical boundaries we have today.
That's great to hear. So supportive of your work. You're a wonderful person, Bertina. So glad that you're in our lives working on all of these things. You're the perfect person for it. So you always put a smile on my face. I can't wait to see you in person again.
Mel, thank you very much. It's really an honor. Really appreciate it.
Bye,
thank
Bertina.
You. Bye-bye.
So let's jump over to Tricia Williams, Interim Head of Research for the Mastercard Foundation. And what's exciting about Tricia is that we've talked a little bit more on the domestic front today. And Tricia is thinking about international work, especially Africa. Tricia herself is, I think, in Toronto, and so we get to have that global lens as well. So I'm really excited about that. Welcome, Tricia, and I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and yes, I'm happily representing the Canadian international quotient of this panel. So I'd like to shift the conversation more to a global context. And as we've seen, employment is definitely a concern in the US, and it is in Canada as well, but the issues and solutions are not always the same, and indeed they vary in many countries. And I'm going to challenge us to think a little bit about developing countries, and specifically Africa, more today. So let me just advance here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So let me begin by providing a brief background about the Mastercard Foundation. We were established in 2006 through the generosity of Mastercard when it became a public company. The foundation is independent with its own board of directors and CEO, and is a registered charity based in Canada. We are focused on ensuring that millions of young people, and especially young women, have access to dignified and fulfilling work. We have a smaller program with Indigenous youth in Canada, but most of our work is in sub-Saharan Africa. So why are we focusing on youth employment, and why in Africa? So first of all, most people in Africa are young people. By 2050, the current population is expected to double to 2.5 billion people. And even then, most people will be under the age of 25. Second, this growing population will join the labor force. There's an urgent need to provide opportunities for young people to study, learn, and contribute to the prosperity of their households and countries. And despite all of this, we know that a significant gap exists between young people and the skills that are needed and the employment opportunities that are available, much as we already heard about the US. There are mismatches between training programs, skills needed, and frankly, there aren't enough jobs, and what jobs do exist are often poor quality ones. So we have a program in 7 countries in Africa called Young Africa Works, and we're focused on creating systemic solutions at scale that address these challenges and provide dignified and fulfilling work opportunities to young women and young men. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't have advanced it here, but we're also seeing concern about the coronavirus crisis, both health and economic crises, and that they could threaten the livelihoods of millions of people, so even the limited formal sector jobs that do exist. So how is the future of work different for Africa? Even before COVID, we've been looking closely at the future of work in Africa. And while the global narrative around the future of work tends to focus on some of the things we've heard about today, such as automation, technological developments, AI, machine learning, we'd argue this is a perspective largely shaped and perpetuated by the global North. And by the global North, we're primarily referring to the US, Canada, Western Europe, and we have specific conditions such as a declining birth rate, the movement of manufacturing jobs, and a relatively low cost of capital compared to human labor. So those all help support a conversation or dialogue around the future of work that is based on a vast supply of data through statistical agencies and relatively highly engaged governments. And this sets the tone and framing for the global narrative on the future of work. In the global South, on the other hand, the issues are quite distinct. The population is growing rapidly, manufacturing is much sought after by many governments, and at least in Africa, capital costs are quite high compared to human labor. Reliable data can be hard to come by, and most governments are challenged to focus on the issues of today rather than preparing for the issues of tomorrow. So I want to talk about 2 research studies we conducted in 2019 to inform our perspective and strategy on the future of work. The first thing we asked was what information already exists on the future of work in Africa. And working with a firm, BFA Global, we scanned the existing literature and conducted extensive interviews. The second thing is we asked what information do key stakeholders need. We worked with Genesis Analytics based in South Africa to look across several different African contexts for the information needs of 4 priority groups: government policymakers, private sector firms, development partners, and young people. And really we found remarkable similarity across those 2 studies. We saw that the information has largely been shaped by the global North, even when those concepts are applied to Africa. So even using terminology such as the 4th Industrial Revolution, when many countries are still trying to catch up to the 2nd and 3rd ones, or focusing on electrification, there was an awareness that we need a more contextualized imagining about the future of work in Africa. So this isn't necessarily about the Mastercard Foundation or anyone else coming up with the solutions. It's about empowering African leaders to drive the thinking and solutions for their own countries. So we'd argue that we actually need not only more research, but also more nuanced scenarios so we can make choices about the trade-offs that might exist in the future. So based on this research, we suggest that we need to broaden our collective understanding about the drivers shaping the future of work, particularly in Africa. And we're talking about 5 broad drivers. So one is technology. So artificial intelligence, machine learning. This will be a critical driver, but it isn't the only one. We also need to think about climate change. So there could be disruptions to climate and livelihoods that come, especially in economies that are heavily reliant on agricultural basis. So for instance, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are responsible for most of the world's production of cocoa. And you can imagine that a big disruption in the cocoa plant due to climate change could have an impact not only on their economies, but also on their global production of cocoa. We're also thinking about issues such as migration, global trade, urbanization, and how they all contribute to changing and shaping the kinds of opportunities that are available for young women and young men in Africa. And especially I'd highlight in global trade, as we see the conversation currently about global value chains and sourcing PPE, we may experience a bit of a retrenchment, and those kind of pathways to manufacturing opportunities may close for places like in Africa, when places that were prior available to countries such as in Asia. So we're envisioning a world in which there's more research, dialogue, and debate about how the future of work may shape out. This is about enabling African institutions and thought leaders to generate evidence and potential solutions and to test them out with different companies, with different countries, with different policies. And we want to hear the insights and experiences from other leaders in other contexts so that this conversation around the future of work can truly be global. So I'd like to leave you with a challenge today. We're witnessing widespread upheaval of our current social systems interactions. People are longing to get back to their businesses, to attend school, and to engage in social settings. Mel, you talked about the new normal. Well, let's challenge ourselves to build back better. Let's challenge ourselves to build a world in which we have opportunity for everyone, including in the US and in Africa and around the world, to have the opportunity to learn and prosper. It's a challenge that is certainly about the future, but it can begin today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. That's wonderful. Always nice to see the global perspective, especially work in Africa. I know Mastercard Foundation does a lot in Africa and really taking a leadership position there. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of the attendees. Again, hope everyone is staying healthy and safe. And we really are thinking about everyone and their loved ones and families. Don't forget to please register for the Social Innovation Summit on June 2nd through 4th. You can go to socinnovation.com and you will get this same session there over the course of 3 days. And again, thank you to all of our wonderful Social Innovation Summit partners. So hope everyone has a great day, and let's partner together to find some great solutions. Have a good day.